Tonight, you're going to eat something at a party without thinking twice. Maybe it is a piece of grilled meat. Maybe it is something sweet. Maybe it is something fermented, something that softens the edges of the evening. You will not think about why that food is on the table. You will not be surprised that that particular combination of flavors feels right for a celebration. But if you trace that instinct back far enough, back past your grandparents, past their grandparents, past the first cities and the first farms, you would find something strange. You would find that the food on your plate tonight is older than civilization itself. And the reason you are eating it at a celebration is not a coincidence. It is a signal. Your ancestors figured something out about food and ritual that modern science is only just beginning to understand. Here's the real question. Why do humans celebrate with food at all? Every culture on Earth, without exception, marks its most important moments with a shared meal. Birth, death, marriage, harvest, war, peace. All of it gets translated into eating. That is not random. That is not just tradition. That is a biological pattern written into your species over hundreds of thousands of years. And when you look at what ancient humans actually ate during those moments, the picture that emerges is far stranger and far more deliberate than anyone assumed. Start with the oldest evidence we have. In 2017, archaeologist Mina Weinstein-Evron and her team excavating Hilazon Taktit cave in Israel uncovered the remains of a feast that took place roughly 12,000 years ago. This was a burial feast, a celebration of death and passage. And what did the people at that gathering eat? Tortoises, hundreds of them. The shells were cracked in a specific way, roasted and shared among a group of at least 35 people. There were also wild cattle bones, wild boar, and the remains of an eagle. Not random scavenging, not everyday eating. A carefully assembled menu for a ritual moment. Why tortoises? In that region and that era, tortoises were abundant but slow-moving and easy to catch. They were not the most prestigious prey, and yet they appear again and again at ancient ritual sites. Researchers believe this was deliberate. The tortoise, carried into the cave in bulk, represented abundance. It represented the idea that the group had enough to share, enough to give to the dead, enough to survive. The feast was a statement about the living, made in the presence of the dead. This is one of the first things you have to understand about ancient celebration food. It was never just about hunger, it was always about meaning. Every ingredient carried a message. Every preparation method was a choice, and those choices were understood by every person sitting around the fire. Now move forward in time. Around 10,000 years ago, something dramatic happened to human eating: agriculture. The ability to grow grain meant that humans could, for the first time in history, produce a surplus. And the first thing they did with that surplus, before cities, before writing, before metal tools, was brew alcohol. Researcher Patrick McGovern at the University of Pennsylvania has spent decades analyzing ancient residues left behind in pottery, and his findings are consistent across dozens of sites. The earliest grain cultivation did not produce bread first. It produced beer. The impulse to ferment, to transform grain into something that altered consciousness, predated the impulse to bake. Celebrations came before daily bread. This is not a small detail. Think about what it means. The most intelligent, creative, socially complex human beings who had ever lived, the ones who had just figured out how to grow their own food, looked at their harvest and said, "Let us make something that brings us together and changes how we feel." They were not brewing beer because they needed calories. They were brewing it because they needed connection. Because shared altered states, as any anthropologist will tell you, are one of the most powerful social bonding mechanisms known to human groups. Brian Hayden, an archaeologist at Simon Fraser University, has documented this pattern across dozens of ancient cultures. His feasting theory argues that large communal feasts served a critical social function beyond nutrition. They were where alliances were made, where debts were created and repaid, where hierarchy was established or challenged, where the group defined itself. The food was never just the point. The food was the vehicle for everything that mattered, and the most celebrated foods, the ones reserved for those moments, were always the ones hardest to produce, most intense in flavor, and most likely to transform how the people eating them felt. What were those foods? Across multiple ancient cultures and multiple continents, the pattern is remarkably consistent. Roasted meat, specifically large game or domesticated animals, appears at virtually every ancient celebration site we have found. Not because meat was rare in all cultures, in some it was relatively common, but because roasting a whole animal over fire was a communal act. You could not do it alone. The preparation required cooperation, the sharing required trust, and the fat and protein hit of large game meat produced a genuine physiological response, a warmth, a satiation, a sense of well-being that humans still associate with celebration. When you smell meat grilling at a party today, you are responding to a signal your nervous system has been trained to associate with safety and abundance for hundreds of thousands of years. Honey was another celebration food of extraordinary importance across ancient cultures. Archaeological evidence of honey consumption by early humans goes back at least 8,000 years, with rock art in Spain depicting honey gathering. But honey was not an everyday food. It was dangerous to obtain. Wild hives were defended by bees, often located high up or in difficult terrain, and its sweetness was unlike anything else available in the ancient world. When humans tasted honey, the brain responded the same way a brain today responds to the sweetest, most intense flavors available. Pure dopamine, pure reward. And because it was rare and dangerous to obtain, it carried status. Offering honey at a celebration meant you had taken a risk for this moment. It meant this occasion was worth bleeding for. Fermented foods appear across almost every ancient celebratory tradition we have found. Not just beer and wine, but fermented fish paste, fermented grain porridges, soured dairy. Fermentation did something to food that ancient humans could not fully explain, but clearly valued deeply. It intensified flavor. It made food last longer. And in the case of alcohol, it produced effects that felt, to ancient people, indistinguishable from the presence of something sacred. Consciousness changed. Inhibitions dropped. People laughed more easily, cried more openly, connected more deeply. The fermented drink at the ancient celebration was not just refreshment. It was a doorway. Researcher Christina Warrener, a biomolecular archaeologist at Harvard, has used ancient dental calculus, the hardened plaque on ancient teeth, to reconstruct what specific individuals actually ate across their lives. Her work has revealed something striking. The diversity in ancient diets was often far greater than assumed. People who lived in the same region and the same era sometimes show wildly different dietary profiles, suggesting that access to certain foods was actively managed and socially controlled. The special foods, the ones that appear in dental records only occasionally, the ones found at burial sites and ritual spaces, were special because access to them was deliberately limited. The scarcity was the point. The rarity was what made them sacred. Think about what your body does when it encounters something rare and intensely flavorful after a long stretch of ordinary eating. It does not just register taste, it registers significance. The brain treats unexpected reward differently from routine reward. When something rare appears, dopamine spikes harder. Memory encoding deepens. The moment becomes more meaningful, not just emotionally, but neurologically. Ancient humans did not know this in scientific terms, but they felt it. They knew that eating something extraordinary at an extraordinary moment made that moment matter in a way that ordinary eating never could. This is why ancient celebration food was almost never the same as daily food. The feast was marked as different from the meal because the difference itself was the message. You are not in ordinary time right now. Something has changed. This matters. Pay attention. And then there were the foods that went further. The foods that ancient cultures used, specifically because they altered perception. Certain mushrooms, certain plants. The residues of psychoactive compounds have been found at ancient ritual sites from the Americas to Europe to Africa. Not everywhere and not in all celebration contexts, but consistently enough that the pattern is impossible to ignore. Certain cultures use these substances specifically at moments of transition: birth, initiation, death, the beginning of a war, the end of one. And the foods used in those contexts were treated with reverence that bordered on fear. They were prepared by specialists. They were consumed in specific quantities. They were understood to carry the person who ate them somewhere beyond ordinary experience. You do not need to have eaten those foods to understand the impulse behind them. The impulse is the same one that puts champagne in the hand of someone who just got married, or sets out the finest food in the house when a guest arrives who matters. The impulse is this. This moment is too important for ordinary experience. We need to mark it. We need to feel it differently. Food, ancient humans discovered this long before anyone wrote it down, is one of the most reliable tools the body has for creating that feeling. Here is what is strange. Here is the part that should stop you cold. Almost none of this is gone. The foods have changed. The specific ingredients are different. But the pattern, roasted meat, fermented drinks, rare sweet things, shared substances that shift how you feel. That pattern is sitting on your table at every birthday, every wedding, every holiday, every gathering that matters to you. You did not learn it. You did not decide it. You inherited it. It was baked into your social instincts long before anyone could explain why. Tonight, when you eat something at a party and not think twice about it, think twice about it. What is on that table? Why does it feel right? And how many thousands of years of human celebration had to happen before you arrived at exactly that moment, eating exactly that thing, feeling exactly the way your ancestors felt when they ate around a fire in a cave 12,000 years ago? The feast is not just the food. It never was. The feast is the message. You already know exactly what it means.